The passport caught fire so quickly it barely had time to flutter in her stepmother's hand before the flames ate through her entire future. Lyanna Easton stood frozen in the doorway of the parlor, her packed duffel bag heavy on her shoulder, watching the small blue booklet curl into black ash. The woman who had married her father 6 years ago and buried him 2 years later held the burning document with kitchen tongs, her face serene in the firelight. "You can't," Lyanna whispered. "I already have." Caroline dropped the remnants into the grate. "You're 18, dear, but without identification you won't make it past the county line, let alone across a border. The house needs you. I need you." The house didn't need her. Caroline needed a maid she didn't have to pay, a companion she could control, someone to absorb her moods and her silences and the particular cruelty of being kept like a doll on a shelf. Lyanna had counted down to her 18th birthday like a prisoner, marking days on a cell wall. She had applied for jobs in 3 countries, saved every penny from the under-the-table work Caroline couldn't monitor, planned her route to the northern border crossing that operated 24 hours a day. She'd planned everything except this. "You're insane," Lyanna said, her voice shaking. "I'm practical." Caroline settled into her chair, picked up her tea. "Now put your bag away and start dinner. I'm thinking chicken." Lyanna didn't remember leaving the house. One moment she stood in the parlor, the next she was running down the dark road, gravel crunching under her boots, the duffel bag slamming against her spine with every stride. Her phone was in her pocket, useless without money for a new passport, useless without time. The border was 40 miles north. The crossing closed at dawn for cleaning and shift change and didn't reopen until noon. If she missed that window, she'd lose the job offer in Camaras, lose the apartment deposit, lose everything. She ran. The road stretched empty under a moon that hung fat and silver between the trees. Her lungs burned, her legs ached. She didn't slow down. At some point she realized she was crying, tears cold on her cheeks, and she wiped them away furiously. She would not give Caroline that satisfaction, even in absence. A truck stopped for her outside the town of Merrick. The driver was old, kind, asked no questions when she said she needed to reach the Valamon border before sunrise. He let her off at the crossroads 10 miles south of the checkpoint and wished her luck. She ran again. The sky was paling at the edges when the border station came into view, a low concrete building straddling the road between 2 countries, floodlights casting everything in harsh white. A short line of cars idled at the barrier. Lyanna stumbled into the pedestrian lane, gasping, and a guard stepped out of the booth. "Passport," he said. "I don't have it." The words came out broken between breaths. "It was destroyed. I need to cross, please." The guard's expression didn't change. "No papers? No crossing?" "I have a job waiting. I have an apartment. I'll send for documents as soon as I'm across, I swear. I just need—" "Miss, step aside." "Please." She hated how her voice cracked. "Please, you don't understand. Step aside or I'll call security." The horizon was definitely lighter now, the dark blue of deep night fading toward gray. In an hour the station would close. In an hour Caroline would wake and find her gone and call the police and report her missing or stolen or insane, whatever lie would bring her back. Lyanna's throat closed around a sob. "She burned it," she said, to no one, to the universe. "She burned it, and I can't. You can." The voice came from behind her, low and cold and certain. Lyanna spun. The man who stood at the edge of the floodlights looked like something out of an old painting, the kind that hung in museums behind velvet ropes. He was tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in a dark coat that brushed his knees. His hair was white, not gray, true white that fell straight to his collar. His skin was pale as marble. His eyes were colorless in the artificial light. He wasn't looking at her. He was looking at the guard, and the guard had gone very still. "Lord Quillen," the guard said. His voice was different now, careful. The man, Lord Quillen, apparently held out a hand. Something passed between them, too quick for Lyanna to follow. The guard took it, studied it, and his eyebrows rose. "This is sufficient." It wasn't a question. The guard looked at Lyanna, then back at the document in his hand. Yes, my lord." He turned to Lyanna. "You're cleared to cross." Lyanna stared. "What?" "Go," Quillen said, still not looking at her. "Who are you?" Someone who dislikes waste. He stepped past her toward the tree line, moving without sound. You ran 40 miles. It would be disappointing if you stopped 10 feet from the end. The guard was waving her through. The barrier was lifting. The sky was growing lighter by the second. Lyanna hitched her bag higher and walked forward on numb legs. She made it 3 steps into Camaris before she turned back. The man was gone. The trees stood silent and empty. The guard had returned to his booth and wouldn't meet her eyes. Lyanna walked north into a country she'd never seen and tried to convince herself she hadn't imagined the whole thing. The apartment was small, cheaper than it should have been, tucked above a bakery on a street that smelled like yeast and sugar. The landlady accepted cash and didn't ask about references. Lyanna unpacked her duffel, hung her 3 shirts in the narrow closet, and sat on the edge of the bed until the shaking in her hands subsided. She had crossed. She was here. She was free. The job started in 2 days, a secretarial position at a small import company that paid enough to live on. She could apply for emergency travel documents, prove her identity slowly and carefully through birth certificates and school records. It would take time, but she had time now. She had a door that locked from the inside and a window that looked out on a street Caroline had never walked. She lay back on the bed and closed her eyes and tried not to think about the man at the border, the way the guard's whole demeanor had shifted, the impossible documents that shouldn't have worked. She failed. The bakery owner was a round woman named Hestia, who brought Lyanna a bag of day-old rolls on her first morning and refused payment. The import company was run by a nervous man named Dimitri, who spoke 4 languages and couldn't keep track of his own calendar. Lyanna organized his files, answered his phone, learned the rhythms of bills of lading and customs forms. It was boring work, and she loved it, loved the predictability, loved going home at 5 with nothing expected of her except to exist. She saw the white-haired man twice in the first week, once standing across the street from the bakery at dusk, a pale figure in the crowd that melted away before she could be sure. Once in the park, she cut through on her way to the grocery, a glimpse of a dark coat between the trees. Both times she told herself she was imagining things. She didn't quite believe it. On the 8th day, she came home to find her apartment door ajar. Lyanna's first instinct was to run. Her second was anger, hot and bright. She had lost too much to fear already. She pushed the door open slowly, scanning the small space. Nothing looked disturbed. Nothing was missing. But someone had been inside. She could feel it the way an animal feels a shift in air pressure. A coat lay draped over the back of her single chair, heavy black wool, expensive. She recognized it before she touched it. "You should lock your windows," the cold voice said from behind her. Lyanna spun, heart slamming. The man Quillen stood in the doorway, too large for the frame, backlit by the hallway's dim bulb. "You broke into my apartment," she said. "Your window was open." He stepped inside, closed the door. The space shrank around him. Anyone could have entered. "So you thought you'd demonstrate that by entering?" Something that might have been amusement flickered in his pale eyes. "I thought I'd return your property." "That's not my coat." "No." He moved past her to the window, pulled it shut, locked it. "It's mine. You'll need it." "For what?" "The cold." He turned to face her finally, fully, and the weight of his attention was a physical thing. "You plan to stay in Camaris?" "Yes." "Then you'll need warmer clothes. Winter comes early this far north." Lyanna folded her arms. "Thank you for the weather report. Now tell me who you are and why you helped me." "I told you, I dislike waste." "That's not an answer." "It's the one you're receiving." They stared at each other. He didn't blink, didn't fidget, didn't do any of the small human things that filled silence. He simply stood there, patient as stone, and waited for her to break first. "I don't need your coat," Lyanna said. "Keep it anyway." "I don't need your help. You did a week ago. And I've thanked you, mentally, several times." She picked up the coat, held it out. "Take it back." He didn't move. "You're angry." "I'm confused. People don't just help strangers for no reason. I had a reason." "Which was?" "My own." He crossed to the door, opened it, paused. "Lock this behind me, and the window. Stop breaking into my apartment and I won't have to." That definitely was amusement now, faint as breath on glass. "I make no promises." He left. Lyanna stood holding the coat, still warm from his body heat, and didn't know whether to laugh or scream. She locked the door. She locked the window. She hung the coat in her closet because throwing it away felt wrong and she couldn't articulate why. She dreamed of fire that night, of blue passports turning to ash. But when she woke, there was frost on the window and the room was ice cold. She wore the coat to work. It fit perfectly. She tried not to think about what that meant. Dimitri's import company occupied the second floor of a building that had seen better decades. The stairs creaked, the heater rattled, and the coffee maker only worked if you hit it on the left side. Lyanna learned which floorboards to avoid, which clients were chronic late payers, which customs officials would accept a charm offensive in lieu of proper documentation. She was good at the work. It felt like building something. On her third week, a man came into the office just before closing. He was ordinary in every way that mattered, medium height and medium build, brown hair, forgettable face. But something in the way he moved made Lyanna's instincts scream. He smiled at her. "I'm looking for Lyanna Easton," he said. Her blood turned cold. "Who's asking?" "A friend of the family." He stepped closer to the desk. "Your stepmother is very worried about you." Lyanna's hand slid toward the phone. "I'm an adult. I don't need to report my location." "Of course not." His smile never wavered. "But she'd like to speak with you. Apologize for the misunderstanding." "There was no misunderstanding. Tell her I'm not coming back." "I'm afraid it's not that simple. There are legalities. Your father's estate, matters that require your signature." "Mail them." "Some things must be handled in person." He leaned against the desk, casual. "There's a car outside. It's a short drive. We can have you back by morning." Lyanna stood. "Get out." "Miss Easton." "Get out or I'm calling the police." The man's smile finally faded. "Your stepmother has friends. Miss Easton, people who can make your new life here very difficult. It would be easier for everyone if you simply came willingly." "I said no." He reached for her arm. Lyanna jerked back, knocking over her chair. The man's expression shifted into something ugly. He grabbed for her again. The window exploded inward. Glass showered across the office. Lyanna threw her arms up, felt shards bite her skin. Something moved too fast to follow, a blur of white and black and sudden violence. The man from the car hit the wall hard enough to crack plaster. He slumped to the floor. Quillen stood in the center of the office, breathing easy, not a hair out of place. The last light of sunset, caught in his white hair, turned it briefly gold. Blood dripped from his knuckles. "You broke my window," Lyanna said stupidly. "I'll pay for it." He turned to the man on the floor, who was groaning, trying to rise. "Leave." "You can't." Quillen moved. Lyanna didn't see him cross the space, only the result, the man lifted by his collar, feet dangling. "I am Quillen Greyorn, king of the northern bloodline, and I hold treaty rights to this entire border region under accords your human government signed before your grandfather was born. This woman is under my protection. You will leave. You will not return. You will tell her stepmother that any further attempts to reclaim her will be considered an act of aggression against my house. Do you understand?" The man made a choking sound. Quillen dropped him. He scrambled for the door, fled down the stairs, gone. Silence settled over the office, broken only by the rattle of glass shards under Lyanna's boots as she stepped forward. Quillen was studying his knuckles, frowning faintly at the blood. "Vampire," Lyanna said. "Yes." "King." "Yes." "You could have mentioned that." It didn't seem relevant. He looked at her and something in his expression shifted. "You're bleeding." She glanced down. Small cuts on her forearms. Nothing serious. "It's fine." It wasn't fine. He crossed to her in 2 strides, took her arm in his hands, turned it gently to examine the damage. His skin was cool against hers, dry and smooth. His touch was impossibly careful. "Glass wounds are prone to infection," he said. "I'll wash them. I have a healer. I have tap water and bandages." His mouth almost twitched. "Stubborn," says the man who keeps breaking into places I occupy. "I used the window, very different from breaking in. You shattered it." "A technical detail." He released her arm, stepped back. "The man was a tracker. Your stepmother hired someone to find you." "I got that part." Lyanna sank into her chair, suddenly exhausted. "What did he mean? Legalities? My father's estate went to Caroline. There's nothing for me to sign." Then he was lying. Quillen moved to the broken window, studied the street below. Or she's manufacturing reasons. Either way, they won't stop. Can't you just— She gestured vaguely. I don't know, use your vampire king authority again? I can discourage individual hunters. I can't prevent her from sending more. He turned back to her. Unless you disappear entirely. Come with me. Lyanna blinked. What? My territory extends north and east from here. I have estates, resources, protections that no human tracking service can bypass. You'd be safe. I don't even know you. You know I've kept you alive twice now. That seems relevant. Why? The question burst out of her. Why are you doing this? You're a vampire king. You have wars to fight, or blood politics, or whatever it is vampire kings do. Why do you care about one human woman with stepmother problems? He was quiet for a long moment. The sun had set fully now, and in the dark his eyes caught the lamplight like an animal's. I watched you run, he said finally. 40 miles through the night, no food, no water, no certainty you'd arrive in time. You didn't stop. You didn't slow. Most humans would have given up. I didn't have a choice. Everyone has a choice. You made yours. He moved toward the door. Think about mine. You know where to find me. I really don't. Yes, you do. He paused in the doorway. Lock the window after I leave. What's left of it. He was gone before she could respond, melting into shadow like he'd never been there at all. Lyanna sat in the wreckage of the office, glass glittering on every surface, and tried to organize her thoughts into something resembling order. She failed. Dmitri took one look at the office the next morning and burst into tears. Lyanna calmed him down, called a glazier, paid for the repair with her own money because explaining felt impossible. She told him she'd surprised a burglar. He believed her. Most people believed the easy lie. Quillen's coat hung in her closet. She kept catching herself looking at it. 3 days passed. She went to work, came home, locked her doors and windows, slept badly. No one else came looking for her. She started to relax. On the 4th day, she found the letter. It was slid under her apartment door, cream-colored paper, expensive. Her name in calligraphy on the envelope. Inside, a single sentence in Caroline's precise hand. There are courts that deal in girls like you. Lyanna's hands shook as she read it again. And again. Courts. What courts? Human trafficking? Was Caroline actually threatening? The window rattled. Lyanna spun, pulse spiking. Quillen hung from the fire escape like gravity was a suggestion, his white hair loose around his face. He tapped the glass. She opened it. Do you just lurk outside my apartment every night? Only recently. He climbed inside with unnatural grace, saw the letter in her hand. What's that? She handed it to him, watched his expression go cold and still, ice settling over stone. Courts, he said softly. What does that mean? Exactly what you're afraid it does. There are organizations that trade in border crossers, people who slip through legal cracks. They sell to labor camps, private estates, anyone willing to pay. Your stepmother has sold your location to someone who trades in such things. The room tilted. Lyanna sat down hard on the bed. She wouldn't. She's cruel, but she's not. She burned your passport and trapped you in her house. What line do you imagine she won't cross? Fair point. Lyanna pressed her hands to her face, tried to breathe through the panic. So what do I do? Run again? Running won't help. They have your scent now, your pattern. They'll find you anywhere you go that's still human territory. Then what? Quillen crouched in front of her, bringing his eyes level with hers. They were gray, she realized, not colorless. Gray like winter clouds, like steel, like something ancient and immovable. You come with me, he said, to my territory, under my protection. They can't touch you there. For how long? As long as necessary. That's not an answer. It's the only one I have. Lyanna met his gaze, searching for lies, for hidden motives, for any sign this was another trap. She found nothing but patience and a strange, quiet certainty that felt almost like safety. Why? She asked again. Please just tell me why. His jaw tightened. For a moment she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, because I know what it is to be trapped. Because I'm tired of watching humans destroy each other over cruelty and paperwork. Because you ran 40 miles and didn't stop, and that's rare. Because he stopped, started again. Because I want to. It wasn't a good reason. It definitely wasn't a complete one. But something in the way he said it, low and almost defensive, made her believe him. Okay, Lyanna said. He blinked. Okay? I'll come with you, temporarily, until this is resolved. Temporarily, he repeated, and something flickered through his expression too quick to name. I have a life here now, a job, an apartment. You'll have them again when it's safe. Promise? He stood, offered his hand. Promise. She took it. His fingers closed around hers, cool and certain, and she had the sudden absurd feeling she'd just made a bargain far older and stranger than she understood. They left that night. Lyanna packed her duffel, told Dimitri she had a family emergency, left her key with Hestia. Quillen led her through streets she'd never walked, north and east toward the edge of the city where buildings gave way to forest and the streetlights faded to nothing. A car waited at the tree line, sleek and black, driver already behind the wheel. Quillen opened the back door for her, a gesture so old-fashioned she almost laughed. She slid inside. The interior smelled like leather and something else, something cold and clean she couldn't name. How far is your territory? She asked as the car pulled away. 20 miles. We'll be there before midnight. And it's safe? Completely. From trafficking courts? From everything. She wanted to ask more, but exhaustion crashed over her suddenly, bone deep and irresistible. She leaned against the window and closed her eyes, and felt the road hum beneath the tires. At some point she felt weight settle over her shoulders, Quillen's coat tucked around her like a blanket. She tried to say thank you. Sleep took her before the words formed. She woke to moonlight and silence. The car had stopped. They were parked in front of gates that rose 15 feet high, wrought iron, twisted into patterns that hurt to look at, too complex for human hands. Beyond them, a house. No, not a house, an estate. Stone and dark windows and towers that disappeared into the canopy. It looked like something from a history book, something that should have crumbled centuries ago but hadn't, preserved by will or magic or sheer stubborn refusal to fall. Welcome, Quillen said, opening her door, to Greyorn. The estate was freezing inside, temperature dropping noticeably once they crossed the threshold. Lyanna pulled the coat tighter and tried not to stare at the entrance hall, the vaulted ceiling, the chandelier that held real candles burning with flames that didn't flicker. A woman appeared from a side corridor, tall and white-haired and dressed in black, her skin the same pale marble as Quillen's. My lord, she inclined her head, then looked at Lyanna with open curiosity. A guest? Lyanna Easton. She'll be staying in the East Wing. Quillen shrugged out of his coat, handed it to the woman. Lyanna immediately missed its weight. Lyanna, this is Severina, my chamberlain. Anything you need, ask her. Severina's smile was sharp. Human needs, how quaint. Be nice, Quillen said mildly. I'm always nice, my lord, just not usually to humans. But her tone softened slightly as she turned back to Lyanna. Come, I'll show you to your rooms. Try not to wander after midnight. The older parts of the house get confused about time, and you might not find your way back. Lyanna glanced at Quillen. He nodded. I'll find you tomorrow. Sleep. She followed Severina up a staircase that seemed to spiral forever, down corridors lined with portraits of pale-faced people in ancient dress, past windows that looked out on gardens turned silver by moonlight. The chamberlain moved in absolute silence, her footsteps making no sound on the stone floors. How long have you served Lord Quillen? Lyanna asked, mostly to break the quiet. 300 years, give or take. That's a long time. Not particularly. He's been king for 1,000. Severina glanced back at her. You're very young, even for a human. 18. A baby. But it didn't sound mocking, just matter of fact. Here. East Wing. Your rooms. The suite was larger than her entire apartment, furnished in dark wood and burgundy fabric. A fire burned in the hearth, despite no visible source of ignition. Lyanna's duffel looked ridiculous on the four-poster bed. There's a bathing room through that door. Kitchen's 3 floors down if you get hungry, though I doubt you'll find much to your taste. We don't keep human food. Severina moved to the window, drew heavy curtains across the glass. Keep these closed during the day. Sunlight won't hurt you, but it bothers some of the older residents. They get cranky. How many vampires live here? In the estate proper? 47? In the territory? Thousands. Severina studied her. You're not afraid. Should I be? Most humans are. Most humans haven't had their lives turned inside out by their stepmother and rescued twice by a vampire king. My scale for weird is pretty broken right now. Severina laughed, surprised. I see why he likes you. He doesn't like me. He barely knows me. The chamberlain moved to the door. Sleep. Dawn's in an hour. We'll all be dead to the world, but you'll be safe. No one comes into Greyorn uninvited. She left. Lyanna stood in the center of the too large room and tried to process everything. Failed. She washed her face in the bathing room, which had actual marble sinks and a tub the size of a small pool. She changed into sleep clothes. She lay down in the enormous bed and stared at the canopy overhead. She should have been terrified. She was in a vampire estate, surrounded by creatures that drank blood and lived forever and could probably kill her without trying. Instead, she felt oddly calm, safe even, like she'd finally stopped running and the ground had decided to hold still beneath her feet. She slept. Morning came with pale light filtering through gaps in the curtains. Lyanna woke, disoriented, then remembered. Vampire estate. Protection. Caroline's threats still hanging over her like smoke. She dressed, ventured into the corridor. The estate felt different in daylight, less gothic horror and more faded grandeur. Dust motes hung in the air. Portraits watched her pass with painted eyes. She found the stairs, descended, got lost twice before locating what she hoped was the kitchen. It was empty. Severina had been right about the food situation. The pantry held wine, various bottles of dark liquid she didn't want to examine too closely, and nothing remotely edible by human standards. Lyanna's stomach growled. There's a village 2 miles south. She spun. Quillen stood in the doorway, dressed differently than she'd seen him before, simple dark shirt and trousers, his white hair tied back. He looked less regal like this, more real. He held a basket. I sent someone to fetch supplies, he said, setting it on the counter. Bread, cheese, fruit. I wasn't sure what you'd want. Lyanna stared at the basket, at him. You sent someone to get me groceries? You need to eat. You're a 1,000-year-old vampire king. Yes. And you're worried about my breakfast. Should I not be? She didn't have an answer for that. She pulled the basket closer, found fresh bread still warm, hard cheese wrapped in cloth, apples that smelled like autumn. Her throat went tight. Thank you. He nodded, turned to leave. Wait. The word came out sharper than she intended. He paused. Talk to me, please. I'm in your house, under your protection, and I don't understand any of it. Just explain. Why am I really here? Quillen was quiet for a long moment. Then he pulled out a chair, sat. The gesture was so unexpected, so human, that Lyanna sat too without thinking. The courts that trade in people, he said slowly, operate in legal gray spaces. Border regions, disputed territories, places where human law gets complicated. Most vampires ignore them. We have our own problems, our own politics. But I patrol the borders under treaty, and I see what humans do to each other when they think no one's watching. I've seen it for 1,000 years, and I'm... He stopped. Tired of it? So you help people? Just randomly? No, usually I ignore them too. Humans have their mess, we have ours, and the treaty forbids interference. His gray eyes met hers. But you ran 40 miles. You didn't give up. And when I saw that tracker in your office, when I understood what your stepmother had done. His hands flexed on the table. I've ended lives for less. You're saying you care. I'm saying I'm not letting them take you. The fierceness in his voice startled her. Lyanna tore off a piece of bread, bought time by chewing, tried to organize the tangle in her chest into something resembling coherence. How long do we wait? For this to blow over? It won't blow over. Your stepmother won't stop as long as she believes she can reclaim you. He leaned back, studied the ceiling. I invoked treaty rights when I removed that tracker. It buys time, makes you expensive to pursue. But eventually she'll find someone willing to try anyway. Then what's the solution? Permanent protection. A legal claim strong enough that no human court will challenge it. And what claim would that be? He looked at her directly. Marriage. Lyanna choked on bread, coughed, stared. What? Under treaty law, a human married to a vampire lord falls under our jurisdiction completely. Human courts have no claim. Your stepmother could spend every penny she has on trackers and lawyers, and they couldn't touch you. You're suggesting we get married. I'm presenting an option. We've known each other 2 weeks. I'm aware. You barely talk. I'm talking now. This is insane. Lyanna stood, paced to the window, back. Marriage to a vampire to you. It would be a legal arrangement. I wouldn't, he stopped, expect anything beyond what you're willing to give. That's not, I didn't mean, she pressed her hands to her face. I don't know what I meant. This is too much. Then don't think about it. He stood, moved to the door. You're safe here regardless. The marriage is simply the most permanent solution. There are others. We'll find them. Quillen. He turned. Why would you do that? Marry a human you barely know just to keep her safe? His expression did something complicated. Ask me again, he said quietly, when you're ready to hear the answer. He left. Lyanna stood in the empty kitchen, surrounded by vampire wine and human bread, and tried very hard not to cry. The days developed a rhythm. Lyanna woke at dawn while the vampires slept, explored the estate, ate meals from the supplies Quillen replenished without her asking. The library became her refuge. 3 stories of books in languages, living and dead, windows that looked out on forests that seemed to stretch forever. She found novels, histories, poetry written by hands, centuries dust. She read about vampire law, treaty accords, the complex web of territories and bloodlines that governed the immortal world. Quillen found her there on the 3rd day. She was curled in a chair by the window, book in lap, watching the way light moved through leaves. He appeared without sound, settled into the chair across from hers. You're reading Mercadian, he observed. Trying to. My grammar's terrible. It's a dead language. Your grammar's allowed to be terrible. Says the man who probably spoke it fluently. I did. Still do. He tilted his head. You're bored. I'm hiding in your house from human traffickers. Bored isn't the word I'd use. What word would you use? She considered. Restless. I'm used to working, to doing something. Here I'm just waiting. Would you like a task? Like what? Severina's been complaining about the estate records for 50 years. They're a disaster. No one wants to organize them because it's tedious, and vampires have no patience for tedium. He met her eyes. You organized Dimitri's files. You could do the same here if you wanted. I'd pay you. You're offering me a job. I'm offering you something to do besides stare at trees and worry. It was a good offer. Better than good. It gave her purpose, structure, something to focus on besides the slow drag of fear. Lyanna closed the book. Where are the records? He smiled. It was brief, barely there, but it transformed his face from stone to something almost warm. I'll show you. The records room was exactly as bad as promised. Centuries of paperwork stacked without order, correspondence mixed with contracts mixed with inventories in a chaos that made her fingers itch. Lyanna rolled up her sleeves and got to work. She fell into it easily, sorting by date and type, creating systems, labeling boxes. Severina brought her materials, offered dry commentary on various historical disasters documented in the files, stayed to help more often than not. Other vampires drifted through, curious about the human organizing their mess. A man named Theron, who'd been a scholar in life. A woman named Isla, who remembered when the estate was built. They treated her carefully, like something breakable, but not unkindly. Quillen came every evening. He'd settle at the desk, handle his own correspondence, answer her questions about treaties and blood laws and property disputes from centuries past. Sometimes they worked in silence. Sometimes they talked, small exchanges about nothing important, the kind of casual conversation she hadn't realized she'd missed. Did you always want to be king? She asked one night, waist deep in financial records from the 1800s. No, I was turned during a war. I wanted to survive. Leadership happened later. Do you like it? It's necessary. He set down his pen. Someone has to maintain order, manage the treaties, keep the younger vampires from starting wars over territory or insults or boredom. I'm old enough that most won't challenge me. That's as close to liking it as I get. 1,000 years of politics. Sounds exhausting. It is. He looked at her. What did you want? Before your stepmother burned your future. Something quiet. Normal. A job I didn't hate, friends. Maybe travel eventually. Small things. Those aren't small. They are compared to vampire kingdoms. They're harder to achieve. He returned to his letter. Humans live such short lives and spend so much of them trapped by other humans. It's wasteful. She thought about that, about Caroline's grip and the burned passport and 40 miles running through the dark. You really do care, she said softly. About the waste. I told you, I dislike it. That's not the same thing. He didn't answer. She didn't push. She went back to sorting records and tried to ignore the warmth spreading through her chest. 3 weeks passed, then 4. The seasons shifted, autumn settling in properly, the forest around Greyorn turning crimson and gold. Lyanna's records project was nearly complete. She slept better now, ate meals in the kitchen while Severina shared gossip about Vampire Court, wore dresses from the estate wardrobes because her own clothes were worn to threads. She felt less like a refugee and more like she didn't let herself finish that thought. Quillen started teaching her self-defense in the evenings, slow, careful movements in the estate's empty ballroom. He never touched her without warning, never pushed harder than she could handle. He was patient in a way that felt unnatural for someone so powerful. Why are you doing this? She asked after a session that left her breathless and sore. So you're not helpless if trouble finds you. You said I was safe here. You are, but you won't stay forever. Something crossed his face. When you leave, I want you able to protect yourself. When you leave. The words sat heavy between them. Lyanna looked at him, at the way he held himself carefully distant even now, and realized with sudden sharp clarity that he was already bracing for her absence. What if I didn't want to leave? She said quietly. He went very still. What? You offered me a solution. Marriage, legal protection that would last. Did you mean it? Lyanna. Because I've been thinking about it. The words tumbled out now, too fast to stop. I've been thinking about a lot of things. How safe I feel here. How you bring me groceries and teach me vampire history and make sure I have work to do so I don't go stir crazy. How you never ask for anything in return. How you look at me sometimes like... She stopped. Like I matter. You do matter. His voice was rough. To you? Yes. Why? He turned away, a sharp movement. Because you ran 40 miles. Because you're stubborn and fierce and you didn't break even when someone tried to erase you. Because when you read, you bite your lower lip, and when you're thinking hard, you twist your hair around your finger and you laugh at Severina's terrible jokes. Because you're... He stopped, breathed. Because I fell in love with you somewhere between the border and here, and I have no right to tell you that, but you're asking and I can't lie. The ballroom was silent except for her heart, too loud in her ears. Lyanna crossed the space between them, slow steps on polished floor. He didn't move. She reached up, touched his face, felt the cool smoothness of his skin. Ask me again, she said. The marriage. Ask me properly. Lyanna, you don't have to. Ask me. He searched her face. Whatever he found there made something in him break open. He caught her hand, held it carefully. Marry me. Not because you need protection or because it's practical or because you're grateful. Marry me because you want to. Because you might eventually feel something close to what I feel. Because I swear on every year I've lived that I'll spend forever making sure you never regret it. What if I don't need eventually? Her eyes burned. What if I already feel it? Do you? I think I started falling in love with you when you handed that guard fake documents at the border and didn't even blink. I think I kept falling every time you showed up outside my window, or brought me food, or sat with me in silence because you knew I needed it. I think I've been in love with you for weeks and too scared to say it because this whole thing felt impossible. She smiled through the tears starting to fall. But we're already impossible. What's a little more? He kissed her. It was careful, reverent, his hands framing her face like she was something precious. She tasted coldness and something darker, wilder, something ancient pressed into gentle service. When they broke apart, he rested his forehead against hers. I'll have to turn you eventually, he said quietly. If you stay, if we do this, You'll age, and I won't, and I won't watch you die. How does it work? Blood exchange during the dark moon. It takes 3 days. It's painful. And once it's done, you'll be vampire. Immortal, bound to night, tied to me through the bloodline. There's no reversing it. Do I have to decide now? No. Years from now if you want. Or never if you change your mind about all of this. She pulled back enough to meet his eyes. I won't change my mind. You might. I won't. She kissed him again, quick and sure. But I appreciate that you're worried. I'm terrified. His smile was crooked. You've undone 1,000 years of certainty in a month. Good. You needed undoing. He laughed, surprised and warm, and pulled her close. They stood that way for a long time, wrapped together in the empty ballroom, while the moon rose over Greyorn and the forest whispered beyond the windows. The marriage happened a week later in the estate's chapel, a small stone room lit by candles that never burned down. Severina officiated, using words in Old Mercadian that predated human churches by centuries. Lyanna wore a dress the color of deep wine, velvet that pooled at her feet. Quillen wore black and silver, his white hair unbound, and when he slipped the ring onto her finger, iron etched with patterns that matched the estate gates, his hands shook. The vampires of Greyorn attended, silent witnesses to a marriage between species, between mortal and immortal. When Quillen kissed her, making it real, making it permanent, the assembled court bowed. It was the first time Lyanna understood viscerally what it meant that she'd married their king. The celebration lasted until dawn. Vampires drank wine that was probably blood, danced to music without instruments, told stories about centuries Lyanna hadn't lived through. Severina got drunk and maudlin, told her she was good for their lord, that he'd been alone too long. Theron gave her a book of poetry. Isla gave her a knife, silver chased, and told her to keep it close. Just in case, she said, cryptic. Quillen found her on the terrace as the sky began to pale, wrapped his coat around her shoulders. You should sleep. So should you. Sun's coming. I have an hour yet. He pulled her back against his chest, chin resting on her hair. Are you happy? Yes. It surprised her how much she meant it. Are you? More than I thought possible. They watched the sunrise together, gold spilling over the forest canopy. When the light grew too bright, Quillen retreated inside, pulling her with him, leading her to rooms she'd never seen. His chambers. Their chambers now. He closed the heavy shutters, drowsiness already pulling at him. I'll wake at sunset, he murmured, already half gone. Don't wander too far. I'll stay right here. She did. She slept in his bed, surrounded by his scent, and dreamed of running through the dark with white hair streaming behind her and the taste of forever on her tongue. The first problem arrived 2 weeks later in the form of a formal letter delivered by human courier. Lyanna found it on the hall table, cream-colored envelope, familiar handwriting. Her blood went cold. Quillen read it over her shoulder, his presence solid and calm. She's contesting the marriage, claiming I coerced you, that it's invalid under human law. Can she do that? She can try. It won't work. Treaty law supersedes human jurisdiction, but she's being advised by someone who understands enough to make noise. The trafficking courts? Likely. His arm came around her waist. They're not pleased to have lost their claim. They'll push back. What do? We ignore it, or, he paused, we end it. How? I invoke my rights as a treaty lord. I bring your case before the human courts with full documentation of her abuse, the destroyed passport, the attempted trafficking sale. I make enough noise that continuing to pursue you becomes more expensive and damaging than letting you go. His voice went hard. I make an example. Lyanna leaned into him. Will it work? Yes, it'll also expose you to scrutiny, trials, testimony, publicity. It won't be pleasant, but it'll be over. Completely. She thought about Caroline, about years under her control, about the passport burning in the grate, about the life she'd built here, the safety, the love, the future spreading out in front of her like an open road. Do it, she said. I'm tired of running. Let's end this. The trial took 3 months to arrange. Quillen hired human lawyers, prepared documentation, built a case so airtight even Caroline's bought judges couldn't ignore it. Lyanna gave depositions, testified via video link, relived every petty cruelty and trapped year. It was exhausting. It was cathartic. The trafficking court connection unraveled under investigation. Turned out Carolyn had been taking payments for information on vulnerable young women for years. The authorities found records, receipts, names. The case exploded into something much larger than one burned passport. Carolyn was arrested. The trial proceeded. And on a cold day in late autumn, the judge ruled in Lyanna's favor, declared the marriage legitimate, and granted a restraining order that kept Carolyn from ever contacting her again. It was over. Lyanna stood outside the courthouse in a city she'd never visited, Quillen beside her, lawyers packing up around them. She felt light, untethered, free in a way she'd never experienced. "How do you feel?" Quillen asked. "Like I can breathe." She looked up at him. "Thank you. You did this. I just provided resources. You provided everything." She took his hand. "Can we go home?" Home. Greyorn. The word fit perfectly. He smiled. "Wherever you want." They returned to the estate that night, to Severina's victory dinner, to vampires who'd become friends, to rooms that were truly theirs. Lyanna fell into bed exhausted and content, Quillen beside her, his cool hand in hers. "I've been thinking," she said into the darkness. "About?" "Turning, what you said. About eventually." He went very still. "And?" "Not yet. I want a few more years being human, experiencing seasons, tasting food. But eventually," she rolled to face him. "Yes, I want forever with you. I want to see what you see, understand your world completely. I want centuries." "You're sure?" "Completely." He kissed her forehead, her cheeks, her mouth. "Then you'll have them, all of them, everything I have." "That's a long time." "It is." "Think you can stand me that long?" "I'll manage." His smile pressed against her temple. "Barely." She laughed, swatted at him. He caught her hand, kissed her knuckles. They lay tangled together while the night deepened around them, two lives woven into something new and strange and impossibly right. Years passed, 3 of them, measured in seasons and small joys and the steady deepening of love. Lyanna worked on estate records, learned vampire law, became fluent in Mercadian. She traveled with Quillen to other territories, met other vampire lords, navigated the complex politics of immortal society. She was good at it, the diplomacy, the careful words. Severina said she was wasted on humanity. She visited the border sometimes, stood at the crossing where she'd met Quillen. The guard who'd been there that night remembered her, always nodded respectfully. She'd cross into her old country, walk the streets of Camaris, have coffee with Dimitri, who'd figured out she'd married vampire royalty and thought it was hilarious. Then she'd return to Greyorn, to Quillen waiting at the gates, and feel the relief of coming home. The turning happened on a dark moon in her 21st year. She chose it. He prepared her. It hurt worse than she'd imagined, 3 days of fever and transformation, her body rewriting itself at the cellular level. Quillen stayed with her every moment, held her through the pain, fed her his blood when she needed it. She woke on the 4th night different, stronger, faster. Her senses were overwhelming, every sound too loud, every scent too sharp. The hunger was immediate and demanding. Quillen taught her to feed, to hunt ethically, to manage the bloodlust that came with newborn vampirism. It took weeks to find her balance, months to feel comfortable in her new skin. But gradually the world settled into focus, sharper and stranger and more beautiful than she'd known. Her hair began to pale, white bleeding into dark brown strand by strand. Her skin took on the marble quality of the turned. When she looked in the mirror, she saw someone new, someone who'd stepped fully into the impossible and made it her reality. "No regrets?" Quillen asked one night, watching her examine her reflection. "None." She turned to him. "This is exactly what I wanted." "Forever's a long time to be sure." "Then ask me again in a century." He pulled her close, kissed her slow and deep. "I will." They established new rhythms. Lyanna took on more responsibility in the territory, handled disputes, managed treaty negotiations. She was good at it, better than good. Other lords started requesting her specifically for mediations. Quillen watched with pride and something that might have been awe. "You've become essential," he told her after a particularly complex territory dispute she'd resolved without bloodshed. "I learned from the best." I was never that diplomatic. You're plenty diplomatic. You just hide it under glowering silence. I don't glower. You absolutely glower. It's very intimidating. I find it charming. He caught her waist, pulled her into his lap. Charming? Devastatingly. I'll have to glower more often. Please do. They were happy, truly, completely happy. It felt fragile sometimes, too good to last, but the years kept passing and the happiness held, solid and real and theirs. 5 years after her turning, they returned to the border, the crossing where they'd met. It was night, stars scattered overhead, the checkpoint quiet. A different guard worked the booth now, someone who didn't remember a desperate girl and an impossible rescue. Why did you bring me here? Lyanna asked. Because this is where it started. Quillen took her hand. Because I wanted to stand here with you, on this side of the barrier, and know that you're free. Truly free. No one can trap you now. No one can take your choices away. You gave me that night, the impossible documents. You gave it to yourself. You ran 40 miles. He lifted her hand, kissed her knuckles. I just opened a door. She looked at the crossing, the barrier, the road stretching away into darkness. She thought about running through the night, terrified and determined. About passport flames and Caroline's cold smile. About everything she'd lost and everything she'd found. I'd do it again, she said softly. All of it, every horrible moment, if I knew it led here. You shouldn't have had to. No, but I did, and I survived, and I found you. She turned to him. That's the story I choose to keep. He pulled her close, buried his face in her hair. I love you. I know. She smiled against his shoulder. I love you too. They stood at the border as dawn approached, two pale figures in the growing light. When the sun started to rise, they walked away together, north into territory that was home, into a future measured in centuries instead of years. The border crossing behind them stayed empty and unguarded in the early morning. No desperate refugees ran toward it. No one burned passports or trapped daughters in houses they'd outgrown. The world kept spinning. Humans kept hurting each other. But here in this small space, this one life, something had gone right. Lyanna and Quillen reached Greyorn as the last stars faded. Severina met them at the gates, handed them robes against the coming sun. The estate settled into daylight silence, vampires retreating to rest. In their chambers, shutters closed against the dawn. Lyanna curled against Quillen's side. Where should we go next? Next? When we travel again, I want to see more of the world, all the places you've been, all the centuries you've walked through. That's a lot of places. We have time. He smiled, pressed a kiss to her hair. We do. Forever's worth. Then let's use it. They slept as the sun rose over forests that had stood for millennia, in an estate that had sheltered vampires for 1,000 years, in a bed they'd share for centuries to come. Outside, the world turned. Humans lived and died, and fought and loved. Vampires moved through the dark, ancient and strange, and bound by laws older than nations. And in Greyorn, in the heart of vampire territory, a girl who'd run 40 miles through the night slept beside the king who'd found her at the border, who'd opened impossible doors, who'd given her forever when someone had tried to steal even her tomorrow. The story that had started with flames and fear and desperate running ended here, in safety and love and infinite tomorrows. Lyanna's passport had burned to ash, but she'd found something better than borders and paperwork and legal permission to exist. She'd found home. She'd found love. She'd found forever. And that was enough. Years turned to decades, decades to centuries. They traveled, explored, built a life rich with experience and purpose. Lyanna became a respected diplomat in vampire society, known for her fairness and her ability to bridge human and vampire concerns. Quillen remained king, steady and strong, but softened by love in ways his court had never seen. They returned to the border crossing sometimes, stood at the place where everything had changed. Each time Lyanna felt grateful for the desperation that had driven her to run, for the stepmother who'd tried to trap her and inadvertently set her free, for the vampire king who'd watched a human girl refuse to give up and decided she was worth saving. They built something beautiful from ashes and fear and a burned passport. They built forever from a single night of running toward dawn. and in all the centuries that followed, neither of them ever forgot the moment when their impossible story began. At a border before dawn, when a girl who had nothing met a king who had everything, and they chose each other across the gap between mortal and immortal, human and vampire, trapped and free. They chose each other, and they kept choosing each other every night for all the nights that followed. That was the real magic, not the vampirism or the immortality or the ancient power, just the simple, profound choice to love and keep loving through centuries and challenges and the slow, beautiful unfurling of forever. Lyanna and Quillen Greyorn, queen and king of the northern bloodline, walked through their eternity hand in hand. And if sometimes in the deep night, when they stood together watching stars wheel overhead, Lyanna thought about that desperate girl running through the dark, she smiled. Because that girl had been brave enough to keep running, and brave enough to stop running when she found someone worth staying for. The border had been a beginning, not an ending. The passport had burned, but Lyanna had risen from those ashes into something stronger, stranger, more herself than she'd ever been allowed to be. She was free, she was loved, she was forever, and that was the best revenge against everyone who'd ever tried to trap her. She lived, fully, joyfully, infinitely. She lived.